Well, I can't start until we're live.
Do I hear my name?
Yay! You made it.
Okay, thanks. Let me know. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AMA number 51, the 8th of June. Very exciting AMA today. So firstly, I'll just introduce everyone. So we all know Arthur Brock, founder and CTO, and Mary Camacho, executive director, Holo, and also introducing Marcus Phillips, who's the Holochain education advisor. Hey, Marcus.
Hello.
Okay, super. So before we get into some conversation around the recently announced Holochain education program, I think we'll just jump into Mary. Do you want to give us a little bit of an intro into the program, its genesis, and some details?
I can do that when I'm unmuted. So hi, everybody, and welcome. This is going to be a little bit of a focused topic AMA. I know we name them sometimes, but in particular, what I want to just make sure that I share is there are lots of different questions that came in, but we filtered some of those out and are going to focus on the ones that really deal with Holochain and the Holochain education program today. So yeah, so let's talk about it. We made an announcement. We started off a couple of weeks ago announcing a big initiative that we're going to be really focusing and funding developer education from Holo. And this is Holochain education. So how to build apps, how to build distributed Holochain applications in particular. And this is, we've done a little bit of this over the years, but this is really important and that we're doing this now because Holochain's ready in a way that it's never been ready. And so this is really timed to support the developer community and the ecosystem with a Holochain that is ready to build applications. So the other reason is that more and more we're starting to get requests for talent and who can they hire and what projects where can projects look? And the reality is that right now, because Holochain hasn't been ready, there aren't large numbers of developers that we can recommend to folks who are asking us about these things. So it's really time for us to level up and to invest in education and make it a priority. And this is what we said we were going to do all along for our strategy for growth. And so we're starting it with this first experience in Austria. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing. So we are basically getting together a group of 12 to 20 learners in Austria for 2 weeks to focus on learning Holochain and Rust. And this is an on-site and it's an immersive education process. So this is really different from anything we've ever done before. We have had fantastic education programs that have been built out of the community that are dev camps and things like that, but they've always worked a little bit differently. And this is really shifting into something that has people learn in an immersive environment and move quickly through everything that you need to do to be able to build hApps. We've done the only teeny version of things we've ever done is hackathons, where we've done these 2-day events where folks have tried to build a hApp in 2 days, but it's never gone deep and it's never been everything that you really need to get through. So that's one of the big things that's different. Eventually, we'll evolve these things into online formats and maybe into other formats of education. But what we're doing right now is really learning through this immersive process as well, how Holochain really can be taught and how Rust needs to be taught in order for these apps to be built. So that's really what we're doing. It takes place in July from the 10th to the 22nd. We've got some fantastic instructors. We're really leveling up what we're doing into professional education. So Marcus, who's here with us today, is going to be talking a lot about this. Marcus Phillips We also have Guillem Cordoba, who you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with if you've been in our community for a while, because he's worked a lot in the ecosystem and developed a lot of the teaching tools that are out there right now. Liz Penny will be there. All these folks are described in detail on the Developer Immersive page that we've got linked out there that people are sharing the link of. So Liz has also got a background in developer education, technical education, as well as Mohammed Meguni, who is also joining us. And he has also worked with Marcus and Liz at Hack Reactor and other development dev ed locations. Sorry, I should have read everything ahead of time, and I'm not doing a great job of that, but I'll let Marcus correct me with the details. We'd like to invite everybody to apply who's interested. And we know that some folks are wondering if they're interested. There are some events that people can get their questions answered, but you can also get your questions answered by just starting the process of the application. And our preferred deadline for this is this Friday, but we're going to take applications on a rolling basis until we've got the right group of people. And we'll talk a little bit more about who that is. The thing is, if we really want to have people have enough time to plan flights, get their time away and other preparations. So if you're just not sure yet, go ahead and do the application and don't just skip it. If you get all the way to the application, there's a 2-part application. The second part of it does require €100 refundable deposit. If you're not going, we're going to refund that to everybody who doesn't attend. But I want to make sure I just call that out. And then the last thing I really want to prioritize and talk about is scholarships. We are committed to having the folks who really should be here at this educational opportunity in the room. So we're looking at supporting candidates who are likely to be very successful in this initial immersive. It's challenging, so it's going to take the right sort of person to be there. So we're looking for people who can both learn and contribute to this process. We're also looking for candidates who fit the needs of the emerging ecosystem, folks who have shared interests, passion, and the kind of future goals that align. We're also looking for candidates who have a history or a passion for really meaningfully contributing to Holochain and the distributed ecosystem that's out there. So if this is describing you, we invite you to apply, and please let us know if you're interested in a scholarship. I think that's about it for giving the once over. I'm sure there's a lot more detail we'll get into, but I'd like to pass the baton back to David.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mary. Yeah, really, really exciting. Okay, so let's get to know Marcus a little bit. So yeah, Marcus, I think everyone's I think everyone's really enjoyed getting to know you, and nice to introduce you to part of the broader Holochain ecosystem here today, and looking forward to a whole series of people getting to know you in the coming weeks and months and years. So tell us a little bit about, firstly, just your experience in software development education.
I would ground it in my own introduction. And by the way, just thank you for having me. I've been such a fan and proponent of what Holo and Holochain have been doing over the years. It's just an honor to have a function in this community. So it's really nice to be here. But in answer to your question, I ground my journey as an educator in the way I was brought into the industry myself. So a ragtag team of friends inducted me into their little friend group in college. One of them in particular was a cryptographer and distributed systems engineer doing a PhD. And so I just wanted to learn everything they knew. It was so fascinating to me. I wasn't a programmer yet. I wasn't maybe I was technically minded, but I didn't have any chops. And the depth of their generosity in helping me not fail out of the classes I recreationally kept signing up for in computer science touched me in a way that felt like I needed to pay it forward. And I've been doing that for the rest of my career and life. So that manifested in the time after university when I I got done with a sort of hitchhiking around the world episode and decided I really did want to contribute something. And I broke my way into the industry, kind of climbing up from intern level programmer in Silicon Valley. And all along the way, when I would have a friend reach out who wanted to go on a similar journey or just wanted to learn something about programming, I would always welcome them into my ecosystem, and they could sleep on my couch the way I slept on that friend group's couch all through college, pulling all-nighters trying to finish my assignments. And so a lot of people in my life came into the industry through that kind of peer-to-peer mutual support, non-traditional pattern. When I wound up working at Twitter for a while, they gave us time to do whatever we wanted for about a week every quarter, as long as it contributed something to the company and its goals and its community. And what I always chose to do was run a developer education program for anyone who was either mostly non-technical, wanting to, maybe they joined Twitter with the intention of growing into a technical role, or maybe they were in a technical role and they didn't know front-end programming, since that was what I was focused on at the time. So I just developed these compressed opportunities to onboard from a layperson level into the industry. And that was really fun for me. And I always enjoyed developing curriculum, trying to make it accessible. Eventually that matured into the boot camp that my co-founders and I started in 2012, which was one of the first. And our whole alignment was, we really genuinely believe that software education can be done much, much faster, and maybe with a bit more of a human touch, like a sense of deep care for the learner experience. I was given space to do as much as I possibly could and wanted to take care of my learners, and that has been one of the greatest honors of my life. So I've just been I've been deeply focused on learning the theory of how people learn, and in particular refining the process by which people onboard to nuanced, difficult technical concepts. And now I get to apply that to a project that I've been watching and advocating for so long, which makes me very happy.
Super. Well, on that note, can you tell us just a little bit about how you came across Holochain?
So I mentioned that I was sort of brought into programming generally by I'm thinking especially of one of that ragtag crew who he's just an inspiration to me. It's just a huge inspiration. He structured so much of my philosophy of how to reach the world that I had dreamed of since being, a kid. I always thought that the contentious, rivalrous, competitive mode, even though it has a place in the world and it's a functional way to move through the world sometimes, maybe it's overrepresented, and maybe there's a lot of inefficiency as a result of all of the competition and one-upsmanship that I experienced. And I thought, I'm not sure we need to live this way, and I don't know how to escape the constraints that are, forcing so many people in the world to build their motivational systems around someone else doing less well so that they can do more well. But that seems it runs counter to how I like to move through the world and how I like to connect with people. I learned ways in which cryptographic instruments and certain technical mechanisms could possibly allow for that world. I was way back in the early 2000s when I was being onboarded to like Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom and just that whole category of thinking. I felt joy. I felt potential and possibility. Like this is this is amazing. I can't believe this math has been discovered, and we're gonna roll it out together as a society. It's gonna change everything. And of course, as we all know, it's 20 years later, and it wasn't even new at the time, right? Like cryptography has been around for a long time. It's taken a long time for us to even glimpse what's truly possible. For me personally, it struck me as like climbing Everest to try and build a functioning system all by myself. So that wasn't really an option. And I've been trudging up the foothills of it for a long time, wondering, where are my peers? Who's going to be working on this with me? It seems like I'm not the only person who has thought of this. There has to be a place that people gather to work on this vision of the future. And maybe the biggest blocker is the networking layer, because you can't build social infrastructure that makes everyone capable of collaborating in a fair game if the networking protocol itself is not conducive to that. The social infrastructure would be captured for the fact that it's built on a shoddy foundation. So that's the context in which I approached Holochain in the first place. I watched the terrain and the horizon for projects that would be addressing any of this cluster of problems, and I was really tickled when I finally encountered Holochain, because it struck me as obvious from a distance that it was different from all the blockchain projects I had seen, structurally at least. And I think as a community, the ethic of the Holochain community is much different, and it inspires me to. It's a world I want to participate in, and that's not universally true of all crypto projects, you know.
Well, great. And so from that context, both your professional background and then that background in being introduced to Holochain, obviously there's been a step towards. So can you talk a little bit more about like what had you take that next step?
Well, I feel like it might have more to do with my having grown into being clearly useful to the community. So when I first found out about Holochain, I was in the middle of continuing to build and grow the school that I had started. I had contact with various people from the organization and from the project, and it was always a lovely conversation, but we didn't really have any touch points that required us to work closer together. And I think it's also true that if you are a person who sees the same kind of possibilities that that I do, and that I think so many people in this community do, the breadth of what might come next is so great that it's not a given any particular person I meet in the world who expresses these same values is thinking of a future I actually want to arrive in, you know? And so I think that it would have been unreasonable of me at the time to hope that merely by being introduced to, you know, people on the project, that they would identify, that person shares the vision that we do in our greatest aspirations. There's a long period of getting to know one another before you can tell that you really you're not in it for some the private benefit of an individual or group that you favor. You're in it for the overall well-being of the system, as best you know how to define that. Obviously, that's a sticky question, but we can aspire to do a good job of it. And I think that takes a long time to really see in one another. And it took me some time to really come to accept that Holo and Holochain had the level of commitment to those values that I do. And in the other direction, I think I needed to finish my project as an educator and get to a point where I was freed up enough and had demonstrated a functional capability that came into a moment of usefulness to the community. So that's what makes this moment interesting, is I happen to be in possession of a skill set that I hope will be useful when brought to bear for this organization.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Marcus. Fantastic. Okay, so switching gears slightly, there's a question comes in saying, thanks so much, best project around, but will you be ready with HDK or 0.1 for the meeting in Austria? And if not, does it still make sense to attract developers until it's released? So Art, do you want to jump in and tell us where we're at with Holochain development?
Sure. But first I want to just say in direct response to the question, yes, we certainly intend to have the HDK 01 ready for the training, because that's actually what we need to be training people on. And we're still working on merging some of the final changes and features in that we want for the long-term stability of apps. But this is really Holochain passing an important maturity milestone that now makes sense for us to start investing in these kind of developer trainings, because Holochain was really changing so quickly before that wasn't stable enough a thing to invest a lot of training in. I mean, we did hackathons and that kind of stuff, and the community was really great about creating dev camps and bringing people up to speed. But all of those dev camps are really about outdated versions of Holochain at this point, unfortunately. And so let me just say a little bit more about what this means, what HDK 0.1 means. First of all, HDK is the Holochain developer kit. It's like our software development kit for how you build apps on Holochain. 0.1 is, instead of like whatever we're on right now, which is like 0.133 or something like that, is what the HDK version is that we're at. So you can tell there's been a lot of alpha versions that have been made, but this is the first version that's starting to cross over really into the stability for you could call it a beta HDK. And so this is a major milestone for apps being able to not have to keep changing to keep up with Holochain. And one of the key points there is we're separating the data integrity code from other functions that are used to access the data or organize the data, read it. And that enables app devs to make updates to their app code, not just to UI code, which they could always do, but make updates to their app code without changing the DNA hash, which actually basically resets the network in Holochain to a new network space. And so what this means is apps can keep running for a long time more stably without having to like reset and have users install a new version and have to worry about how to migrate the data from the previous version and things like that. HDK 0.1 also includes a whole bunch of performance updates, especially our Quantized Gossip, which is an upgrade for long-held data. And actually, it's very possibly a breakthrough for the whole DHT data modeling space. And it also, HDK 0.1 includes feedback that we've been getting from developers about usability. So we've really tried to make building hApps more easy for people. And so we've kind of flattened and simplified a bunch of things and tried to make some things more consistent within the developer kit. And also, it is a significant step toward Holochain being feature complete. And so we're queuing up basically the release of Holochain beta to follow the beta HDK. And this is a part of getting ourselves set up also for the third-party code and security audits, which are starting this summer. So these are all kind of like big deal things that are coming out of HDK 0.1.
Sounds very exciting. Brilliant. Okay, so with that progress, Marcus, do you want to jump back into, okay, so hopefully it looks like we're on track with HDK 01. And the curriculum is going to start with Rust. So what are the kind of things people in this developer training and beyond are going to learn?
So the way I think about that is, in my favorite world, we would just be teaching Holochain for the entire immersive, because that's really the goal and focus. That said, I don't want to limit our audience to just people who happen to have already done all of the difficult work of learning a esoteric language. And B, if if we skipped Rust, we would be missing a big opportunity. I almost think that Rust and languages in general are amenable to a kind of compression in the curriculum design step that that is unique to a language, right? Like programming languages are such interesting subjects in that they are inherently designed to be concise and specific and clear. And that means that when you tell the story of how to learn a language, you can be equally concise and consistent and clear, which means your curriculum can be optimized very, very far. So if I were to send people out to go learn Rust without our support, I would expect, I mean, the main problem would be the fall off rate at which people would not complete the process because they go down so many blind alleys. So not only does that take time, but that's really demoralizing. And I would expect the process to take them, I don't know, no less than 4 weeks if I had to take a stab at it. Just sort of imagine what it takes to kind of like move through those exercises and new concepts and onboard them and check whether it's the one that really matters and so on. So by streamlining that for people, we get to open it up to more people, first of all, and then those people get through that process way, way faster. So in terms of what we would cover, really, it's just kind of, start to finish, how do you write in this language? We're going to focus on those features that are most necessary in order to write Holochain apps. There's certain things you don't really need to do a ton of with Rust in order to write a Holochain app. It is itself a framework, so it's going to handle certain heavy lifting for you. But I don't think that really exempts us from touching each aspect of the language. So there's really nothing we're leaving out as far as I'm concerned. Maybe some advanced concepts. I'll give you a quick list of what we plan to cover. It's not going to sound surprising. It's basically what a list you would make if you wanted to learn the language yourself. So it would be like a context and overview thing about like, how does the language fit into the ecosystem? What broad strokes design goals does it address, and what part of the industry is it useful in? Then sort of the basic syntax, like, blocks and functions and how to achieve iteration and all of those simple things you might need to know to convert from any language to a new one. And then maybe the most novel piece of Rust, which is move semantics. Rust has this quirky constraint it places on you as a developer that turns out to be very, very useful, where your variables get used up as you mention them in your code. So there's not a ton of languages that have this mechanism, and it has the effect of allowing Rust to catch errors for you at compile time, and that means we're just going to need to practice a bit with that. And I think say that's the biggest nuance of this curriculum that would be different from any other language that we might teach. From there, we go on to compound types and structs, enums, which are a wildly powerful thing in Rust, code management like modules, crates, the standard library, generic types, so the ability to make collections that are templated to a particular signature of types within that collection, for example. Traits, which are like an aspect of an interface for a struct or object, a class type mechanism, and testing. So it's a rather start to finish thing, and we're aiming to have all of that done in 4 days. I hope it is clear how much the excitement for me of getting all of that to fit naturally into such a short period of time and still feel like a story that is relatable and makes sense and we can look back to and remember. That's what makes me so jazzed about curriculum design in general. It feels like building a jet engine to get something that can operate at that level of efficiency.
Perfect. Okay, great. And then we move on to Holochain.
So that section is it's going to be a complete shift from Rust. Well, obviously, people will continue to write in Rust. We will be able to help support them in remembering things that they've only recently learned, but we're going to focus all our attention on Holochain from ideally the end of the first week, so that last day, the Friday. I want to get our legs under us with Rust so that we can start talking about Holochain and nerd out about it recreationally the rest of the weekend together. I want to have space to dream and make progress on our personal projects together from a context of already having laid the groundwork for that last day of the first week. The Holochain section is going to be a lot more moldable as we go. We have a similar structure in place for how to get through the Holochain conversation, but I also think that people are going to have questions and specific needs in the projects they've aspired to step up to or already tried to step up to that are going to shift how we focus as we go through that plan. So that it's my expectation that that's going to be a lot more kind of negotiated as we go together. I'll list the plan as it stands prior to kind of coming into contact with reality, as they say. So we would start with the core principles of Holochain, the fact that it is serverlessness, that it is serverless, the fact that it enforces data integrity in a half a dozen different ways. A half a dozen different forms of data integrity are assured by the architecture of Holochain. So just understanding what it is we're playing with to begin with. Then we're going to be introducing fundamental cryptographic primitives, like primitives across all distributed systems that rely on cryptography. What is a signature? What is a Merkle chain? Why are these things interesting and relevant? They will come up organically as we encounter the features of Holochain. And we did a fair amount of work to organize the steps in the conversation so that it motivates clearly the introduction of each of these cryptographic concepts. So whether you have familiarity with them or not, I think you will find this an informative kind of lens on what and why cryptography is the way it is. Then we'll move on to sort of things like the elements that go into your code when you're writing an HC app, the DNA, the integrity zone that's being debuted as part of this version, the notion of a cell, which is the runtime version of a DNA, hApps themselves and the conductor that holds them and keeps them available to one another and to the user, source chains modeling each of the agents that interact with this stuff. There will be a section where we talk about the DHT itself for each of these apps, the DHT being the main data structure that allows these communities of agents to communicate clearly and together. Then code structuring in such an app with modules, which are called zones, bundling, and then lastly, what it looks like as a runtime, which is very distinct from how the code looks on the page. Once you boot a Holochain app, you have to write your code with an intention of seeing it boot into a particular structure. You want to kind of understand both sides of that equation. So that's the overview of the Holochain side of it. But like I said, it's going to be really motivated by where our learners encounter challenges or which challenges attract them the most, we're gonna try very hard to move with those wins as we encounter them.
Amazing, perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, it sounds very exciting, I have to say.
I'm super jazzed. I'm so glad we're doing this.
All right. So jumping in, like I know we're gonna do a little bit more on this in a few minutes time, but let's just go back to HDK 0.1 again, and how will that affect the apps out there? And do you think we're going to see a lot of new apps because of it?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, as I already described a little earlier in the call, releasing HDK 0.1 is a huge milestone for us. And, you know, a little bit of what the experience I think has looked like for developers is you build an app and within a few weeks, Holochain has new features or fixes or optimizations that you want to be using. And you have to actually make changes to your app to recompile it for that version of Holochain. And then that changes the DNA hash, which means your users have to update to a new thing. And so far, there probably hasn't been enough data to make it worth migrating. So yeah, anyway, it's been, I think, painful for app developers to be in a position where they can't build a lot of stability or momentum. And so the key thing that happens with this, I'm not sure it guarantees a whole bunch of new apps pop up, although I think we will see that starting to happen as well. But I think what it will actually start to do is make the apps that already exist much more stable and allow them to reach out to a lot more people. And there are a bunch of projects that have kind of been waiting in the wings for this kind of stability, and even projects that we have that we meaning people related to Holo that are side projects, not necessarily projects sponsored by Holo, that we're waiting for this kind of thing to really invest much energy and roll out. So, you know, as I mentioned above earlier, the key thing here is separating the code that manages the data integrity and validation from the other code in the system, so that as long as you're not changing your data structures or your validation rules, then we don't have to change the DNA hash. Everybody can still basically enforce the same rules. We still get the security and protection from the validation, and you're still ensured to have the same data integrity. But you can make new ways that those things are collected, or you can make new ways of, you know, rendering those things, or make other optimizations, or add features, or, you know, as long as it doesn't change the validation rules. And that's kind of been a thing that has wanted to happen, just evolutionarily speaking, where we separate this strong enforcement we have around validation from the things that we can have a little bit looser enforcement of, to allow apps to evolve more easily. So hopefully we'll see a lot more apps being able to build momentum in their communities with this stuff.
Yeah, and we might not see the pickup. Maybe I think what you're pointing to is we might not see the pickup like tomorrow, but we know that even over the course of the last 2, 3, 4 years, there have been many different developers, teams, ideas, etc., come into the community, and people will say, okay, yeah, I'll come back when this is ready, and some do and some don't. But the other thing is, as I say, if apps become increasingly stable, then not only people are going to be able to those apps be able to reach out, but then people are going to be able to take components of that, mix-ins, bridges, etc., and start to build. And so we start to get the kind of like the composable developer ecosystem emerging as well. One game like chess starts to get picked up a little bit, and someone takes, you know, the idea of like a turn-based game and starts to play with this. So yeah, I think I really do see it as the start of like that next phase in cultivating the ecosystem. Okay, Mary, so what are your hopes for these dev camps?
Well, I think for us, it really, well, first of all, they're not dev camps, even though they're retreats and they're immersive. I just want to language it a little bit differently because the dev camps were created by the community. And I just want to acknowledge all that work that went into creating those. And so these are really, we're calling this developer immersive, Holochain Immersive right now, just as a way to distinguish that. And the hope that we have right now is that this really level up and kind of get at a lot of what Marcus was speaking to, having people be able to rapidly become capable of building apps and learning what they need about Rust and about Holochain in a way that really serves them and works and has it connect with what they're trying to accomplish such that they can build. And for us, at the end of it, it's about having people who are job ready, who, when we start getting requests for projects to find folks who can help them with build their Holochain apps, that we are building out a community of developers that we can recommend as well. So it's a huge win-win in the ecosystem to be doing this right now. And to Arthur's point, it's the right time to really start having it happen because Holochain is there in a way that it hasn't been. That stability has just been key. We've been waiting for these milestones to get to these milestones. And so I'm super excited. Micah said, like you were just talking about how jazzed you are. It's all, for me, this is like, oh, it's coming together. It's coming together. What we were saying that we wanted to do strategically last year, here we are at this new steps, kind of going into a new phase entirely for the ecosystem. And that's super exciting. So
cool. Quickly. And why Austria?
Oh, right. We've had that question show up a little bit. Well, we kind of were bringing these things together. So it was a matter of people's schedules and availability and getting to the go, no go decisions on things. And then it was like, well, in order to do that, you actually have to have a place. So it's the first summer after 2 years of COVID in this world. And we said, okay, let's do this in Europe because we know that there's some energy and momentum here in Europe. So where do we do this? There were hardly any places available that were going to fit the bill. So Austria had the right size place in the right location at the right price on the dates that all the people could get together and do it. So Austria was just a coincidence, I guess. And we're going with it. And it looked like a lot of fun, to be honest. I mean, you're up in the mountains in the Alps. Everybody who was engaged said, well, this looks good. So we said, yes, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay. So Art, how's the implementation of the Quantized Gossip algorithm going, and how does and will it affect performance of DHT Gossip? Thanks for your amazing work. And for those who don't know what the Quantized Gossip algorithm is, could you also help with that quickly?
Yeah, first of all, the implementation's been going really well. It took a little bit longer than planned, but it's actually been going really well, and as near as we can tell, it's completely working, but we're still writing some more extensive tests before merging it in. We want to make sure this is not the kind of thing that you can afford to let something wrong show up later, even if it appears to be working now. We really need complete tests on it because this sharding of data in networked systems is one of those really super complex things that you have to get right, because it's hard to assemble the pieces again later to figure out what's wrong. So just to explain what it is, it's probably actually a breakthrough in the whole DHT space, because it allows us to have a very small, very compressed form for representing the state of data across time and space, basically down to a single hash. At whatever level of, sort of creates a two-dimensional tree, a space-time tree, and lets you have these representations at different levels so you can find differences in the data that you're holding. I think this will also be moving us towards some of the other higher level of guarantees that we want to be able to make about serving, that we know people are serving complete data, and about fork finality, that we know that people can't change an answer later, because if you've converged, if the peers in a neighborhood have converged to basically a particular state hash, then you've reached some form of stability that we can block conflicts from later. And we also, just to note about timing, we are filing a patent with some of these breakthroughs before merging the code in and releasing it. And so that's another one of the delays in the merge, is even though we're kind of like right at the cusp of merging it, we are getting that patent filed.
Super. All right, back onto the immersion then. All right, so Marcus, why is immersive learning so great, and what makes some learning experiences in this format so much better or more effective than others? I think this sort of stems from some of the comments when we announced this program around, like, what about virtual, etc. What about smaller sizes? Those kind of things that people are seeing in different places, or for people that say, hey, I would really love to do this, but I'm in Singapore and I can't travel, and I'd love to just jump in for 2 hours. So can you tell us a bit more about the power of immersive?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, so I think of them as just different modes of arriving towards similar goals, and they have pros and cons. There's trade-offs. I have a particular enchantment with immersion's upsides, and maybe it just has a special place in my heart because I've spent so much time working on that puzzle in particular. But even in an immersive format, you have to think about the alternative that I'm going to call the integrated, as in integrated into your life style of learning, where you re-encounter a little bit of the information several times a week. Maybe you invest 2 hours after work in kind of like picking up another concept and a half, checking in on how you remember what you learned in the last session, that sort of thing. You have to have that integrated style of learning in your immersive, but there's an added effect that happens when you put yourself fully into an environment that focuses on that idea. So let's think about it as the effort of learning creates a cluster of neurons that are all cooperating with one another in your mind and achieving some competency for you. And when you exit the thought space where those neurons are dominant, you are reinforcing a bunch of other styles of thinking that may compete for attention. Worst case scenario, that competition leads to one of them winning, right? Probably the thing you spend most of your time on. Maybe it's work, maybe it's school, whatever. The other sources of your, the other targets of your attention can kind of crowd out that focus on making progress on a difficult new concept. If you experience enough of that pushback from the rest of your mind, you kind of put off a moment of competency, which is the tipping point where you can suddenly use the constructs you've created in your mind in day-to-day life. And now you get free, after the moment of competency, you get free reinforcement of useful ideas. Immersion means we can carefully constrain the variables that would allow a person to fall out of sufficient focus on the ideas that they reach their moment of competency. I think of that integrated learning mode as almost like a more advanced version of the curriculum that you can create after you've really studied how people reach that moment of competency up close and personal. So that's part of why I say it enchants me. As an educator, I get to do my best, fastest, most focused work when I'm in the presence of people who have an opportunity to commit themselves in that same way as a learner.
Yeah, I just want to jump into this one too, because this is what I am so excited about right now. We have an opportunity to learn how people learn. And as an organization, as a community, as an ecosystem, we all need to learn this because it'll make everything we do out there for others, like what Marcus was even sharing in your intro about paying it forward. The learnings that happen in these immersives, these first on-sites, are incredible, and that with people who know how to get the most out of it, who know how to adjust and like get to those tipping points so that we can use them and figure out how to best apply them in the rest of the kinds of learning materials that we'd like to create and support the rest of the community with over time. So this is just, for me, like, why start here? Love that Marcus is on the team and adding so much value already. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to underscore something Marcus was getting to right at the very end. Also, it's the feedback loop. Like, you can immediately see whether what you're communicating is effective or not, or if there's like something else needed to bring it across the line. And that's often much harder in the self-paced or the online type stuff, because you don't get that feedback as quickly. So this is a part of us, connecting with Marcus is really a part of using his mastery in creating this kind of curriculum and ordering and sequencing things and building the right dependencies and finding the right metaphors and analogies to communicate things. And we need that feedback still from the learning process. And so it's a big deal for us that these are immersive and that we get the human feedback immediately, because we're still refining this stuff.
Yeah, and I think for those of you who followed the people on this project for a long period of time, you'd say that immersive experiences are definitely a favorable pattern. In fact, I'd say like immersive experiences in many ways with like intense periods of coming together, and then also periods of dispersion is also like a preferred model for how like teams operate and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, it certainly makes sense as the pattern that we're choosing here. So in this environment, Marcus.
Well, may I just take a moment to also put in a shout out and gratitude to the DevCamp team. That's one of the ways in which I was brought into the community, was through the gracious offering of that curriculum and community. And it's, I just think it deserves to be repeated how tremendous that starting point has been for everything we're doing now. And I hope to get to spend a lot more time with all of those people. They were absolute gems.
Agreed. So how much faster do you think people can learn Holochain with there's like a really amazing curriculum?
First, I'll start with the flashy answer, which I think might surprise some. There really isn't a limit. It is not useful to attempt to name a limit as to how quickly something can be explained. I think that we are conservatively at the 50 to 75% savings on learner effort right now. That's a pretty subjective, assessment. How exactly would one quantify it? But if I was just to count units of time or units of pain, they both seem like we've made a lot of strides in how difficult it could be. Now, to kind of illustrate why I say there is no practical limit, or at least it's not useful to try and predict where you can't optimize anymore. Imagine how difficult it might have been to learn to read and write 1,000 years ago, right? I wasn't there, but they didn't have the same cultural milieu. They didn't have all the same ABC books. They didn't know when to introduce people to it in their life, or what the stories were that connected with children of that age. Nowadays, the comparative struggle, there was certainly a time when literacy was thought to be, like reading and writing literacy, was thought to be only available to certain minds that had the good fortune of being wired for it. And that's, as we've learned, much less true, almost not true at all. So how much faster could it have gotten from that point? I don't think anyone at that moment in history would have been doing themselves a service to try and say, oh, well, I think we could make it twice as fast. You know, maybe you could learn it by the time you're 15 instead of 30. That's just not the case. And we're in a similar situation. So like I said, conservatively, we've already saved 50 to 75% of the time. That means I think we can get through all the concepts in as good as a quarter of what it might have cost someone. But I'm being conservative with that, and I think that it'll continue to shave 10% off at a time as we continue to work on the analogies and the storytelling and the dependency tree of concepts. I look forward to learning how quickly someone can onboard to this. Oh, you're muted.
Yep. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Will the DevCamp and hackathon also be available in Asia? I mean, will this immersive experience, I'll correct the question, be also available in Asia, Mary?
Well, we don't have the next one scheduled at this point. Some of it's going to come from where we're getting interest. Now, some of it's going to come from what we can actually coordinate, what schedules allow for, and that sort of thing. So I don't know. We don't have any plans for anything to be in Singapore or other places, but it's not something we're ruling out entirely. We know that we've had other hackathons and other learning experiences down in Australia in the past, and those have been quite well attended. So, you know, something in that area, those time zones could certainly happen again.
Awesome. Just a time check. We're kind of at the hour, but we've got a couple of really great questions to go. Well, how's everyone feeling about continuing on for a few minutes? Or yeah, okay.
Yeah, I want to hear Marcus's answers to these next questions.
Yes, same here. Okay, so Marcus, we've got like a couple of like slightly broader Holochain questions. So shifting gears from the immersive a little bit. So thank you so much for explanation, Art, for talking through the HDK. Yeah, very exciting. Mary, your enthusiasm. All right, so if we just step back, Marcus, then and back into sort of your what excites you about Holochain, what kind of hApps or Holochain applications are you most excited about? Sorry, I shouldn't say, out of the list of current Holochain apps, which ones do you like most? And what I mean is, like, what are the things you're most excited that are possible on Holochain, the kind of applications you see as possible?
Certainly. Well, I kind of hinted at my passion for this platform, and I might actually call it a design pattern, right? Like there's a design pattern of centerlessness that is not widely observed by the crypto community. Like everybody's trying to achieve consensus network wide, and over the years, in trying to conceptualize social infrastructure that succeeds in supporting the things we actually want to do, the ways we want to do them. I think we want to be somewhat safe from malicious individuals that navigate their way to the top of some bureaucracy and then can penalize the people they don't like. I think we want a certain amount of sovereignty and individual freedoms. I think we want the community to have the power to implement boundaries that keep the community safe, despite how much latitude we give to the individuals in our communities. And that balancing act, I don't personally see a way to solve that while enforcing consensus. So I am excited to some degree. I'm gonna say this is the stuff I'm less excited about. It's great. I'm excited to some degree for all of the, pragmatic apps that resemble Web 2.0 and upgrade it to Web 3.0, whatever that might mean, right? I think it means something in particular, but I think everybody has a different idea of what it means. So I'm not going to try to disentangle those impressions. That upgrading process, like, great, let's do it. The thing that really gets me jazzed is things that you would want a network to allow for minor, sometimes major dissonance within the network as to what the perspective on the truth might be. If we are insisting on only building apps that have a unified singular version of the truth, that narrows us down to a world where there's always an avenue to capture that unified conclusion. Holochain implements this centerless, consensus-free design pattern so studiously that we can have things like mutual credit networks. I would say probably that's my number one most exciting direction for Holochain to go, or rather to allow. I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable participating in a mutual credit network that was implemented on a consensus-oriented protocol. I would expect my peer-to-peer relationships in that economy, be it a financial economy or a social economy or a favor economy, I would expect the protocol itself to subvert my options to join communities that define rules I agree with. I would expect instead for the consensus enforcement to mean that a few developers at the center of those protocols could selectively encourage and allow patterns that tend in less pro-social ways. So let's say the broad category of consensus-free and centerless algorithms, which entails things like mutual credit, pretty much anything that has to operate at scale. So if I would like my devices in my home to participate in a network of support for me and my family, I don't really see a realistic way to do that on the blockchain. And the jury's out on whether I'm willing to trust L2 solutions. I don't see that pattern as nearly as elegant as simply having a consensus-free solution like Holochain. I really wish I could ask this person whether I've answered their question, because I gave a 10,000-foot view and then some specifics, and I hope I succeeded.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think the other sort of broader topic is, I mean, you kind of touched on, but what problems do you think will be solvable by Holochain? I guess implicit in this that aren't solvable or a struggle to be solved right now, and that could be in blockchain, but that could also be in like the non-blockchain, like client server cloud technology paradigm.
Yeah, I think there's some important work that I am very enthusiastic about doing. So if anybody watching or listening is interested in this topic, like, I would be super excited to get in a room with thinkers that find this question interesting. There is important work to be done in narrowing down the category of new possibilities into specific apps, one at a time, so that we can all get busy building the one we're most excited about together. But let me name the category that I think of new possibilities. So I mentioned that consensus-free algorithms seem to make something possible that is not possible in consensus-oriented networks. Let's say there's at least two different things. One, consensus-oriented networks strike me as much more capture-prone, much less capture-resistant. There exists a way that it is, and any number of vectors for capturing control of the way that it appears to be. Maybe this is getting control of a majority of the mining resources. Maybe this is manipulating the media in ways that influence human behavior to converge towards something. There's no way as a security review person, I'm going to name all the vectors, right? We know that every game has an unknowable number of vectors of misuse, right? So when you narrow the game down to a pre-specified algorithm, you eliminate this realm of ambiguity. And I think ambiguity is actually a huge feature. Steven Pinker has a fantastic TED talk covering this in the realm of language, as to how language allows us to do certain things only because ambiguity is possible. And we shouldn't keep looking at ambiguity as the fly in the ointment. I think consensus-oriented algorithms have tried to squash ambiguity, and I respect the instinct there as to why they might want to do that. I suspect they will have their place in the future. But I believe that a lot of the more subtle things we do as humans in a community only emerge because of the fact that we allow differences of opinion to stand, and we wait to see how we're going to resolve those dissonances.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Two quick final questions. But the final part of getting to know you, Marcus, is we keep hearing that developers are leaving their corporate developer jobs and like joining Web3 or doing things they love or whatever. Why do you think this might be? What are you seeing? Given though I guess you've trained a ton of them and got them into these jobs to start with.
I do have a few thousand people that I get to bump into on a regular basis and learn where their careers are going or have gone. And that has been delightful and also informative. Let's say one thing I always struggle with is like, have I contributed well in the world? You know, am I contributing well in the world? And it felt like an unalloyed good to provide education to people who needed to move from whatever economic circumstance they were in into a realm where they had the skills to contribute to the world well. And maybe the scariest part of that is feeling maybe a little tricked myself by the hype in the tech industry, right? There's a lot of talk in all of these companies about how great it is to go change the world. And we find out in retrospect that the work we were doing often serves a malicious purpose. Maybe it didn't when we were doing the work, and then the company becomes captured itself and just reroutes to some new agenda. So I think that whether people get seduced into a rewarding job and an interesting problem to solve, and then find out that the whole time the company didn't really have the world's best interest at heart, or whether they join a team that's small and has big aspirations, and then the nature of our economy and our mechanisms of investment and you know, certain aspects of capitalism crush that idealism. In short, the people I speak with, they want a sense of purpose. They want confidence that they're actually doing work that improves the world, maybe just because they wouldn't be happy otherwise, but also maybe because it feels unstable to be a contributor on a team that you don't actually know the world needs what you're creating. You're afraid that in another media cycle, all of a sudden the thing you're doing is going to be highlighted as like the cause of some huge problem that you weren't briefed on in the interview. So I think that's what I hear from my friends and colleagues and network who are either struggling to stay engaged in their job or actively leaving to go do new things. They're like, oh boy, I don't really get it. I don't get how this is supposed to be a great world for my children, you know?
Thank you, Marcus. That was really beautifully said. It really speaks deeply to the one of the areas that I struggle expressing about when we get lumped into Web3 and we get lumped into blockchain, because the fears that are associated with some of those technologies right now are about pattern and whether or not they actually are replicating the same kind of patterns that exist already today. And so, you know, we're out here trying to say we're building a pattern that's different, but sometimes it's hard to express that difference. And I love how you did that throughout the various answers in your questions today, or to these questions, because design pattern and art, you've talked about this for years, as Zippy has. I mean, this is the nature-based looking out to the biomimicry. We are looking somewhere different about how the world works. And we are hoping that this difference is pivotal to how it can shift behaviors and it can make an impact that isn't just about centralizing more, doing more for a few, bringing about that capturable moment, whether it be a business, whether it be a currency, whether it be a whole economy, essentially. This is what we're talking about. And to hear you express it in the context of, people being disillusioned and yet people stepping out and making choice for purpose and for contribution. Thank you. It was just beautiful.
Thank you, guys. I can't thank you enough for investing in this initiative and for having space to include me. I'm really jazzed about what we're working on.
We are too.
Amazing. Well, on that note, Mary, do you want to just summarize the practical?
Yeah.
I think we've got the dates for the immersive, dates for the application, and any other specific actions you'd like people to take.
Yeah. So again, this first immersive is in Europe. It's in Austria. It's July 10th through July 22nd. We'd like you to apply as soon as possible. Our preferred deadline is this Friday, but we'll keep a rolling application open beyond that. We want you to, if you're just considering this and you're not certain, apply. Start the conversation with us and we'll engage with you human to human. Thanks.
Super. Okay, amazing. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Art. And thanks for joining as well with your croaky voice and getting through everything and giving us all the updates on Holochain and Holochain's progress and the huge milestone of progress towards the HTK and then steps towards beta. And Marcus, thanks so much for joining and sharing background, sharing about the course and sharing about your vision, and really wonderful. And I think we didn't start with the thank yous, just end with the final thank you, which touches on really what stuff that everyone has already shared. But just thank you to everyone over the past few years who has been involved in various education initiatives, been involved in dev camps, taken upon themselves to learn Holochain and teach other people Holochain. I think that really speaks to Marcus. I guess in my mind, as you've been talking today, what keeps coming up is how many people within the Holochain ecosystem have had that kind of dorm room experience that you talk to, and how this is an indication of a different phase, both in technology readiness, organization readiness, and upgrade into how we're doing education and the professionalism and what that might mean for developers coming on board. At the same time, I know that dorm room experience is being shared by people that now step further onto the edge and bring new things into our ecosystem in new ways. And I'm really excited about the honoring of this. Also means there's going to be the ongoing honoring of that kind of experience, which will always nurture. So yeah, thank you for everybody who's been involved in that over this period, and yeah, will continue to be. I think that's good. Beautiful AMA. All right, well, thanks so much, team. And yeah, I think we're all good. And we'll see you either just before or just after the immersive.
Can't wait. Let's go, team.
Yeah, thanks everyone.